Hello everyone, welcome to FY028 Inquiry-Based Learning. This is week 6, and in this week we're going to have a look at the topic of Harvard referencing. I'm sure you're already aware by now, but just to remind you that for this research report, and indeed most of your future reports and dissertations and projects, you're going to need to write down the details for all of the sources, the books, the papers, and the articles that you read and inform you about your research area. And this is going to be important when you refer to information from those sources within your report. And this is why we call it referencing, by the way, so that we can refer to other people's work that they've done. And that's why it's important to write down the details of that source. This is useful for practical reasons of actually being able to locate and find that source again. So the more details about the source that you can write down, the more search criteria that you have, and therefore increasing the likelihood that you'll be able to locate that source again. So that's why we often write down the surnames and first names of authors, as well as the year of publication, the title of the book, page numbers that we look at, etc., etc. And of course, this is going to be helpful not only for yourself, should you need to come back to that source at any point in the future, but also for your readers, in case they want to locate that source and read it for themselves. And as well as those practical reasons, it's also important to give credit where credit is due. If we're going to be referring to other people's work, then we need to declare that it's their work and not our own. And this is important because this will protect us from being accused of plagiarism. If we're open and we're honest and we declare that this information that we refer to isn't our own, we can't then be accused of copying it. Okay, so obviously we don't want to be accused of plagiarism, and it carries a serious penalty as academic misconduct and could risk being expelled from the university, so we want to avoid all of this. It's not going to be good for our reputation either, so it's very wise that we get on board with referencing and learn how to do it correctly. Okay, so that was just a brief reminder regarding why it's important to reference. Hopefully we're all clear on that. For the remainder of this presentation, though, we're going to look at the formatting of how we do it, and specifically in the Harvard style. It should be said that there are many referencing styles and formats out there, but for our computing courses here at Bucks University, we're going to consistently apply the Harvard referencing style. Okay, and this has a particular format that we're going to explore. So when it comes to referencing, there are actually two parts to the process. As you can see on the slide here, there's actually the in-text citation, which is a shortened version of the reference, and in the Harvard style, it's going to be the surname followed by the year of publication. And this information is typically placed within a pair of brackets, the curly brackets, and placed next to the quote or perhaps a paraphrased version of that information that you're referring to in your report. And so for all of those bits of information that you refer to in your report, you'll be expected to have the in-text citation, that shorter version of the full reference. That's the first part. But for the second part, you'll be expected to list the full reference at the end of the report. And this is typically going to go in a new section, typically under the references header, where you list the full details for each of the sources that you have cited in your report. So these full references will also match up to the author surname and the year of publication, but they extend them further to list things like the first name initial, the book title, the page numbers, the edition numbers. If it's a journal article, they'd expect to list the actual journal, where it's from, etc., etc. Okay, so this is where we see the full details of each of those citations that are listed in the report. And of course, it's important that they match. All of the in-text citations should then correspond to a full reference in the references list at the end of the report. And also, just quickly to mention that when you list your references, make sure you list them in alphabetical order of the surname, so that it's then easier for your readers to find the full reference. Okay, so those are the two main parts of referencing. We've got to have both the in-text citation as well as the full reference at the end of the report. And so we're going to start by looking at the in-text citations and how you would write them and the different examples of them. And then we're going to use the remainder of the presentation to look at the different formatting aspects for all of the different sources out there. Okay, so let's start by looking at the in-text citations. And there are subtle differences in formatting depending on whether you are directly citing a source, i.e. quoting verbatim from it, or indirectly citing, where you are paraphrasing or perhaps summarizing the author's ideas. And starting with the direct citations, if you're going to be quoting directly from a source where you're actually copying the author's words as written in the source, first of all, make sure you use speech marks or quotations to enclose that quote, so that's the author's words and not your own. And then you're going to want to include the page number where that quote is from. This is going to be really helpful for the reader to locate that direct quote, just in case they want to find that for themselves. And so if you cast your eye to the third bullet point here, which has the direct quote, "Chocolate has an infinite variety of uses," you'll see that's enclosed in the speech marks here. And then you'll see the in-text citation straight afterwards. And so we see here opening curly bracket, and then we see the author's surname. In this case, it's Mullen. And then we see comma, and then we see the date of publication, which is 2013, comma, and then the page number, which is simply listed as P dot, so we know it's page, and then the number 8. Okay, and then we see close bracket, and then full stop. Okay, and that would act as the end of the sentence, from which you can then go on to start a new sentence, perhaps to explain it or contrast it with other sources. Okay, and so this is an example of a direct citation that's stated straight after the quote, and this is fine when the quote is embedded in a sentence. However, it's not a good idea to start a sentence with speech marks. Therefore, you can also make a direct citation before the quote. For example, you might start the sentence by writing the author's surname, which is Mullen in this case, and then you would open the brackets and write the year of publication, which is 2013, comma, page number, P.8, and then close bracket, and then you can go on to say something like reports, or says, or comments, or writes, and then the actual quote in speech marks, of course, and then followed by a full stop at the end of that. And that would qualify as a full sentence, which of course would look a lot better than starting the sentence with speech marks and then having the citation at the end. That's more appropriate when you're embedding that quote within a sentence that's already been started. Okay, so there's two different ways that you can make direct quotes there, either putting the citation at the start of the sentence or at the end of the sentence. And if it's the case where the page number is not listed, say this is going to be like a web article where it's all one page, in that case it would be appropriate to write the paragraph. If it's a short web article, you can count the number of paragraphs and then write which one it is. Or if it's the case where it's a very long web article and it's very difficult to tell the number of paragraphs, it's perfectly acceptable to write n.p or n.pag to show that the page number is not available. Okay, so hopefully that summarizes the different types of direct citations that you can state. Let's go on now and have a look at the indirect citations. And in contrast to the direct quotes, where you are going to be copying verbatim what the author says, an indirect citation is where you might summarize information from a text, or you may even paraphrase what an author has said in some of the sentences in their text in your own words. And as you can see here in the fourth bullet point, where it gives an example of an indirect citation, we've actually seen that quote above has been reworded very slightly to give the same meaning, but of course it's not the author's words, so therefore it's not a direct quote. As we've reordered it from chocolate has an infinite variety of uses to chocolate can be used in many different ways. And you'll notice that we're not actually stating a page number here, as we're not directly quoting from this book. Instead, we are summarizing one of the ideas. And similar to what I said a moment ago with the direct citation, and in particular starting the sentence with the author's surname, we're actually doing that here. Okay, so as we're not quoting anything, we don't want to start with speech marks, and we're actually starting with a full sentence to just refer to the author. So you see, it says here, as Mullen, and then open brackets, and then the year of the publication, which is 2013, notes, and then the actual idea after that. Again, this is a way of writing your sentences so that they just refer to information rather than quoting it directly. Okay, so hopefully that summarizes the differences between a direct citation, where you quote the author verbatim, you copy literally what they say in the text, versus the indirect citations, where you either paraphrase or summarize one or more of the ideas within the text. Okay, so these are the citations that we're going to expect to see within your report, where you refer to information from other sources. Now let's go on and have a look at the second part of referencing, where you list the full details of the text at the end of the report. And here we've been given a rather helpful template which will tell us all the components of the full reference for most of the sources. And rather helpfully, it's been color-coded and also has a series of annotations as well, with notes and rules for the different components of the full reference. So let's address them one by one. And starting with the author, surname and initials, we see that we start the reference by listing the author's surname. And of course, remember, you're going to be listing all of the references in alphabetical order and ordered by the surname. So this can be done automatically in Microsoft Word or many other referencing tools. And then after the surname, we have comma followed by the author initials, which are typically the first name initial. And then if they have a middle name, that'll be the initial as well. So an example given is Mitchell, the surname, and then comma J.A. And should your source have more than one author, you can also include the second author in the same format with the surname, comma, first name initial, and if they have a middle name initial as well after that. And importantly, in between those two authors, you want to write the word and. And then if you have more than two authors, say you have three, you can actually write that by saying the first two authors in without an and then the final author with an and. So that might be first author surname, and then the initials, and then comma, second author surname, initials, and then and, third author surname, and then the initials. Okay, and of course, if you've got more than that, you can sometimes write et al. As well. We'll get to that later on when we look at some specific examples. Okay, and then if it's the case where the author isn't stated, you can actually write no author with capital N and capital A. But don't confuse this for an organization name. If an organization name is given, or a particular company or institution, you're going to want to write that instead of the particular author names, the editors or the writers of a particular report. Okay, so hopefully that summarizes the author surname and author initial. Let's move on and have a look at the next section, which is year published. And it's here where we're going to want to write the year enclosed within a pair of brackets, curly brackets. If it's the case where we don't know what date this particular text was published, we can write the words no date inside the brackets. Okay, so that's a rather simple one. And then, of course, full stop after that. And then next is the title. And the formatting of this title does actually vary between the different sources. So this is one to keep an eye on. That in the case of books, we actually italicize the title. But please note that for other sources, such as web articles and paper articles and other mediums, this title may not be in italics. So make sure you check the different types of source to work out whether this title is going to go in italics or not. But a general rule of thumb is that if you're referring to the whole work, i.e. the whole piece of text, then this would typically be in italics. But if you're only referring to a part of that text, this typically wouldn't be in italics. Okay, and you'll get to see examples of this when we look at the different formatting of the sources in the following slides. But until then, let's stick with the book example. And in the case of books, following on, after the title, we typically put a full stop there, and then we might refer to the particular edition of book. If it's the case where this work has continually been updated over many years, then we might want to refer to the latest edition, or in some cases a particular older edition, and so we could write that after the title. And the typical formatting for this is the number of the edition followed by the letters EDN, short for edition. And then next we have the publisher details, which is probably going to apply mainly in the case of print media, and particularly to books, where you have a particular publisher who will print and publish the book manuscript on behalf of the author. And this is typically where you would detail the publisher name, and then also the city in which that publisher resides, or the main location if there are several. But please note this is the city and not the country. Okay, so rather than saying UK, you would say London or Maidenhead or whatever town that the publisher has actually published this book. And then finally, if it's the case that we've referred to part of a text, we can actually finish the full reference by listing the page numbers that we've referred to. And if we've referred to a particular section or a group of pages, we can actually specify a range of pages. For example, 99 to 110. And that too would be replaced with a hyphen. So it would actually read 99-110 and then full stop. And in the case of journal articles or magazine articles, we may also refer to the particular issue numbers or the volumes as well. And of course, we'll talk more about that when we get to that specific type of source. Okay, so hopefully this gives you a template for the main components of a full reference. For the remainder of this presentation, we're actually going to look at each particular type of source in turn and look at the differences in style and look at the subtle changes and the nuances to do with the formatting of the reference. Okay, so it's not obligatory to watch the remainder of the presentation. You may want to use it as a reference guide to return to should you actually need to know how to format a particular type of source. You can just click on the timestamps listed below, and that will take you to that particular part in the presentation which talks more about how to format that particular source. Okay, so we're going to go through them one by one, and we're going to start with talking about books. So to reference a book that has one author, we would write the last name, comma, first initial. So in this case, it's Mullen, comma, H dot. And then we write the year in brackets, which in this case is 2013. And then we would write the title in italics. So here it's A History of Chocolate, which you can see is in italics in the examples, and then dot, and then the edition If it's the first edition, we don't actually need to write that. So you'll notice in the example, the first bullet point, you'll see that there's no edition specified. So therefore we can assume that's the first edition. However, in the second bullet point underneath, you can see that there's been a third edition published of this particular book. Perhaps it should be in a later year, but never mind, we'll skip over that. That's for the editions, should there be any later editions of this particular title. Okay, so first edition, not required to write first edition, but for later editions, you would need to specify which one it is. And then dot, and then finally it's going to be the city of publication, which in this case is Nottingham, and then colon publisher, which in this case is Delectable Publications, and then a dot, a full stop to finish the reference. Next, for citing a book with 2 or 3 authors, we have to write the last name and first initial for all of the authors. And then in the case of 2 authors, we would have a and, separating the first initial and the second surname. And in the case where there are 3 authors, as you can see in the last bullet point here, it's actually the case that we have the first author and then comma second author, and then the and is between the second and third author. Okay, so depending on how many you have, 2 or 3, you would put the and before the last author. Okay, and then of course a dot after the last author's first name, and then the year of publication, as always, 2006 and then 2008 respectively, and then the title, of course, that's still in italics, and then the city of publication, and then the publisher, as per the previous example. That hasn't changed. Next, in the case where authors have had a lot of contributors, say they might have had 4 or more authors. That's not uncommon to see that, certainly in journals and sometimes in books as well. It's important that you list all of those authors in the order that they're written, either on the front cover or on the inside pages. In your full reference, it's important that you list all of them, as you can see in the example below, an example of 4 authors. But however, for your in-text citations in your report, it's often very space-consuming to list all of the authors. Therefore, it's common to actually list the first author surname, which in this case would be Mather, followed by the words et al. You'll notice the dot after the al and the year of publication. So this would be Mather et al. 1998. Within the brackets. And of course, et al. Is Latin for and others. Okay, so it's just a short abbreviation, saving you having to write out all of the respective authors in your in-text citation. However, do make sure you state them all in order for your full reference at the end of the report. Okay, and as you can see, everything else in the book reference is still the same. We've got all of the authors in the same format of author surname, comma, author first name initial, and then we've got the and before the last author, in this case, Jackson. And then we've got dot, and then we've got the year in the brackets, and the dot, and then we've got the title in italics, and then we've got city of publication, which is Nottingham, colon, publisher, which is Delectable Publications, and then full stop. Next, for the case where you're referring to a particular chapter by a particular author in a large book, maybe it's a case that you've got a collection of chapters written by different authors and you want to refer to just one of them, you can do this by writing the author of the chapter of the book, not the actual editor, so that comes later, but the author of the particular chapter, which should be listed on the first page of the chapter, of course, and that's in the typical format. That's surname, and then comma, first name initial, dot, and then the year the book was published. You're unlikely to see the individual dates that each chapter was written, so you're probably going to find just the year that the actual collection of chapters was published at the start of the book. And then you're going to want to write the title of the chapter, which in this case is the best Android applications and where to find them, dot, and then you're going to write the word in, colon, the actual editor's name, so this should appear at the start of the book, or if there are multiple editors' names, you're going to include all of them. And of course, you would actually indicate that they're the editors by writing ed dot and then comma. And then you're going to write the title of the actual collection, which in this case is Android : guide. And notice that this is in italics, the actual book title, not the chapter title above. Okay. And then after the book title, you're going to write comma, and then even if it's the first edition, you're going to have to specify that. Unlike books where you can get away with not writing the first edition, in this case, for referencing a chapter of an edited collection, you would have to write the first edition, okay? And then after that, we have the city of publication, which, as per previous examples, is Nottingham, the publisher, Delectable Publications. And then you'll notice at the end, we actually have the page numbers written. So this is going to be the page numbers for the chapter, which we're referencing. And you'll see we've got the range here. So we've written pp.28-46 and then full stop. Okay, so there's a couple of formatting differences here, so make sure you pay attention to the formatting here should you need to reference a chapter of a particular book by a particular author. Should it be the case that you want to refer to different books by the same author, this isn't a problem providing that the dates are different, as you can see in the first two examples, where we've got an example of a book that's been published in 2011, and then another one which has been published in 2014. And so when you come to cite these in your report, you can tell them apart by the different years of publication. However, as you'll see in the next two examples, we have the case where we have multiple publications in the same year. Notice that the last two are both published in 2015, and therefore that would make it hard to tell them apart based on the year alone. So therefore, we actually add in letters after the year of publication. You notice that we've actually got the letters A and B after the years of publication for the Chinese food and the Italian food text. And these letters are actually worked out by the order in which we refer to these texts within the report itself. So if I was to cite information from the Chinese food text first within my report, let's say that's in my opening paragraph, then in the full reference, this would be listed with an A, and so would the in-text citation. And then perhaps later in the report, in my more in-depth discussion, I then refer to the Italian food source because that is referred to after the Chinese food, which came in the first paragraph. This one would then be appended with B in both the full reference and in the in-text citation. Okay, so everything else about the full text reference as well as the in-text citation are the same. The only differences are the letters, which are added for when you have years of publication, which are the same, and these letters are determined by the order in which you refer to those texts within your report. Okay, so now that we've finished looking at all the different variations of book examples, let's move on and have a look at articles and different examples of the different formats and variations of referring to articles. And let's start with citing traditional print journals. So a traditional research journal is going to contain a collection of articles, different papers written by lots of different researchers and authors from different universities, across the world sometimes as well, if it's an international journal. So to refer to one of these, we have to state the author names as we would usually do, and that's of course in the typical format. That's going to be the last name comma, first name initial, dot, and then the year. So again, this is typically going to be the year that the journal is published, not necessarily the year that the different articles are written and finished, although sometimes you might see those vary across the journal, but usually it's going to be by the journal deadline for publication. So usually going to be the case that you'll see the year of the journal written there rather than the year of the article. Okay, and then we have the article title, the title of the paper itself, which in this case is Automation and Machine Learning. And notice that this title, it's not the title of the journal, it's the title of the article. So we don't italicize this, but we do italicize the journal name itself, which in this case is AI Research. Okay, so just remember that. And then comma, then we have the volume of the journal, and then within brackets we place the issue number. It might be the case that this journal is published frequently throughout the year, so it's important that we write those details down. So that would just be the numbers 5 and then the brackets 8 for the issue. Okay, and then of course, to finish off, as we're referring to a particular portion of this research journal, we're not referring to the entire journal, we're only referring to one article within that. We want to specify the page range, which in this case is pp.47-59, and then full stop. For digital versions of journal articles that you access online or through an online database, which I'm assuming is probably going to be the vast majority of journals nowadays. So it's probably going to be the case that you'll access most of your journals online. And so when noting the online version, the digital copy of your journal article, the majority of the details are going to be the same as what we mentioned in the previous slide. So it's author surname, comma, first name initial, date in brackets, and then the title of the article, which is not italicized, and then the journal name, which is italicized, and then you'll have the volume number, and then the issue number, and then the page range. And then following that, you would then specify that this particular article is available online. And you would say that it's available at, and then follow that by the actual web address where you got it from. So in this case, it's a fictional one, which is www.airresearchjournal.com/Lasardi article. And then it's important to note the date that you actually accessed this particular article, because of course web links are highly volatile, they come and go very frequently. And this is the format for this is just saying within square brackets, by the way, it's you would say accessed and then colon and then the particular date that you accessed it on. So it's good to be as precise as possible and note down the day and the month and the year that you accessed it, just so that you and your future readers will know when you accessed this particular website. Newspaper articles now, and whether they've been printed on paper or whether they're available as an online article, the format's going to be similar to the print and online versions of journal articles, as you're only referring to a particular piece of that newspaper. So here the formatting's pretty much the same, where we start with the author surname, comma, first name initial, dot, and then the year of publication, the year that the article was written, then followed by the actual title of the article, which isn't italicized. And then the difference here is that rather than the research journal name, it's the newspaper name, which in this case we have the Weekly Herald, which you'll see there is in italics. And then if it's a print article that you're reading in a physical copy of a newspaper, you would write the page number. And these newspaper articles typically are shorter, so it's in this case, we've only got one page, but of course, that's not the rule. You can have some very long and very lengthy newspaper articles, which may span several pages. So, of course, if you have that, include the page range. And then with the online version, of course, if it's If it's the case that it's a copy of a article that's been run in the printed version of the newspaper, include the page number if known, but of course this isn't necessary if it's exclusively an online article and hasn't been printed in the paper. Then for that case you would just write the available at part of the reference, followed by the website address of course, and the accessed date, the date that you actually access this website. You would put those parts after the name of the newspaper rather than the page number. Okay, so follows a very similar format to the research journals, but just adjust as necessary for either the printed version, run in an actual printed newspaper, or an online version of that newspaper article. Should you want to refer to information in a magazine, you can do so by writing the full reference to contain the author's surname, and then comma, first name initial, and then refer to the date that it was published, and then the title of a particular article of the magazine that you're referring to. And as always, this isn't in italics, but then you want to include the name of the magazine, which is in italics, just like the research journals and the newspaper names, as we saw in the previous examples. And then if the magazine has a particular issue number, you want to include that in brackets this time. It's usually not the case that you get volumes of magazines. Instead, they just count up in ascending order, and whatever the frequency is, it's usually monthly from the first published magazine. Okay, so just include that in brackets there. And then, of course, refer to the page range for your particular article, the particular section in the magazine that you want to refer to. Should it be the case that this particular magazine is available online, either in scanned copy, or perhaps it's a modern magazine which runs online in parallel to printed versions of magazines, rather than including the available at part, which we've seen previously for the newspaper and for the journal online versions, here it's actually retrieved from. Okay, and then followed by the web address where you got access to this particular article. And here we don't actually need to write the date that we actually accessed this article. Okay, so slightly different formatting here. I guess the key really is the web address. So as long as you've got that and then prefixed by the words retrieved from, that should satisfy things. Okay, so just follow this formatting here should you need to cite magazine articles. Alright, so we've finished looking at articles. Let's move on and have a look at online sources now, and exclusively online sources. So this is referring to websites which won't have a paper or in-print equivalent, different from the remit of newspapers and research journals. So this might be a dedicated website which has a particular article. Perhaps it's by an organization instead of a particular author, or like a reporter, a researcher, or an academic. Perhaps this is an organization where the writer isn't specified. So if you don't see a writer name, you can write the name of the organization, the source, whatever the company is behind the website, which here you'll see in the example is Health Tips. All right, and then we've got the date next to that. So this is the date that particular article is published. And again, the dates aren't always published on websites. So if you can't see a date, just write no date in the brackets there. And then we see the title of the particular web page. So this is in italics here. You'll see it's superfoods and where to find them. And then after that, we actually see the word online written in square brackets. Okay, so you want to classify that this is an online web page. And then if it's the case that this web page is being updated regularly, it would be good to include the date that it was last updated on, just so that we're seeing the most relevant information. So if you do see a last updated tag in the web page, it's probably going to be at the top or at the bottom of the page. I do include that as well, and you'll see here this example just says last updated on the specific date, 20th of May 2015. and then follow that by the web page, and of course saying that it's available at this particular page. And then of course include the date that you accessed it, that you viewed it on. Okay, so make sure you record that. Should it be the case that you need to refer to information in an email, perhaps you've had correspondence with an expert in the field, or perhaps conversation with an author or a researcher that hasn't officially published this text, or it's not available in any of their other texts, you can actually refer to this information even whilst it's not been published or peer-reviewed. You can actually refer to it through the format here, and you'd want to write the surname and first name of the sender. So in this case, it's James, D, and then the year that it was sent, the email that is, and then the subject line of the email. And this is essentially going to act as the title of the email. So this is going to be in italics. And then after that, we just simply write the classification of email, which you'll see there is written in square brackets. So that's an easy way to distinguish what type of source this is. Next, to refer to information published on a social media network, or perhaps this would also extend to blogs as well, you can do so by writing the typical elements. We have here the author name. So if you know the name of the poster, the person who posted this comment or this piece of information, you can write that in. So here we just see an example of proud, F. For the author, and then the year. So again, if it records the date that this particular piece of information was posted online, you can write that within the brackets. And then we see the name of the page. So this is going to be the name of in this case, it's a Facebook group. So it's the name of the group, not necessarily the name of the discussion thread, because I guess comments and status updates on Facebook don't really have a title. So in this case, it's going to be just the name of the group. And then you see next to that, we've got in square brackets Facebook. So this is the name of the social media network. So if it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever the format, it's best to write that in there. And then we see a little statement next to that saying it was written on this specific date. So again, if you've got the full date recorded and it's been timestamped, it's good to write that down, the specific date. And then if it's a public group, if it's a publicly accessible page, you can include the link to that so other readers can go to this and see it for themselves. And then you just want to have, again, the accessed date, the date that you viewed this comment or this piece of information. All right, so we're moving into visual media now, looking at videos and image sources. And first up, we have films, videos, and DVDs. So should you ever need to refer to a particular scene or perhaps a idea expressed within a film or a DVD, you can do so by writing the name of the film or the DVD at the start. And notice that actually this is going to be in italics. This is the name of, essentially the title of the source, just like all the other titles of our sources were in italics. So too are the titles of films and video media. And then we have the date, the year of publication, and then we have the square brackets for film. So again, we're classifying that this source is a film, so we can easily tell. And then we have the director after that, so it should be fairly easy to find the director on the DVD sleeve or looking up online. And then if we know the film studio or the filmmaker, we can include that afterwards as well. And any other relevant details to do with production included. Next, we have YouTube videos. So I'm guessing this is going to be a more relevant example to us. Certainly a more recent example of how most of us engage with videos these days. So to do this, we'd have to record the username of the contributor of this particular video that we want to reference. In this case, it's a particular channel called Yummy Dishes. And then we're going to want to record the year that this particular video was uploaded. We usually get the full date being shown on YouTube, so that should be fairly easy to record that. And then we want the title of the video. So this should be fairly easy to find on the actual page of the YouTube video. If it's of a part of a particular series, we can include that, but I'm thinking most of them are probably going to be standalone, unless it's going to be part of a particular series that a YouTuber is doing. If they're doing multiple series, then perhaps we might be able to include that, or if it's part of a particular playlist of videos, we could include that too. And notice, as these are titles, these are going to go in italics, so as usual. And then we got the classification after that. So obviously we're going to record YouTube video within square brackets. And then, assuming that we've still got access to this video and it's publicly available, we can include the web page for this and say it's available at, and then of course the date that we first watched this particular video. Should you ever need to refer to a broadcast or a TV show, you can do so with a similar format to the video formats that we've been seeing so far. You start the reference with the name of the show, or if it's an episode of a particular series, you can start with the series title, which here you'll see is World Kitchen, and then followed by the episode name or number, which in this particular case is focusing on Nigeria, and it happens to be episode 5 in the series. Okay, and then the year that this series runs, as always, in between a pair of brackets. And then the year of broadcast, which should be the same to the year. And then the broadcasting organisation, which in this particular case is BBC One, and then the particular date that it was first transmitted, and also the time as well. So should be able to find this in a TV schedule. BBC is pretty good as well, because it'll have the date that it was first broadcast on the website, so that should be fairly easy to find. Next we have images or photographs, and note that this I think is referring to actual photographs taken on a camera, as opposed to diagrams or particular images that perhaps might be a little bit more relevant for our computing subject. But should you ever need to refer to a print or online photograph of something or someone, you can do so with the following formats. You would start with the name of the artist or the photographer, as always the surname, comma, first name initial, and then the year, if it's known, the year that the particular photo was taken or the image was constructed. And then the title of the image, again, if known. This particular case, I think it's just a description, and which is in italics, so woman enjoying a cup of tea. And then next is the classification of this image, which we see in square brackets here is a photograph. And then if there's any other types of details, such as a collection detail, if it's part of something, or a document number, or you can include that here. And then if there's a geographical place that's been noted, if it's a photograph taken at a location, it might be useful to note that. And also the other details referring to names of libraries or archives or repositories. Next we have maps. So should you find yourself ever needing to refer to something on a map, you can do so by writing the map maker's name. So this might be a name of a person, or it might be a name of an organization. Here it's Speedy Quest Maps, and then the year it was issued in brackets, as always. And then the title of the map, which in this case is a map of a location, a map of Bideford, and it's part of a series as well, so it's in the series of local maps. So as these things are titles, we're going to want to put them in italics, as always. And then if you're referencing a particular part of the map, you would include the sheet number and the scale. And then if it's been published by a publisher, you're going to want to include the place of publication, which is Nottingham in this case, and then colon local publications, the actual publisher itself. Next, we have a particular formatting for podcasts. And I appreciate in this day and age, the lines are kind of blurring really with YouTube videos. There are many YouTubers out there who do podcasts in the format of a YouTube video. They actually film speaking to someone they're interviewing. So if you come across a case where you actually find an exclusively audio-based podcast, which is not on YouTube, you can record that in the following format. You'd have the broadcaster or the podcaster, I suppose you could say, the author's name written first. Here it's Yummy Dishes again, and then we have the year this podcast took place, 2015 in this case, in brackets, and then the series and program title. So again, if it's a standalone podcast with a particular person that doesn't fit into a particular series, you can write that alone, or if it's a part of a particular series, you can include both. And of course, both of these are going to go in italics as they are titles. And then afterwards, we've got the classification again. We've got in the square brackets, we're indicating it's a podcast exclusively. And then the transmission date afterwards. So if the date is recorded when this podcast was either recorded or aired via a particular radio station, perhaps we can include that. And then if we've got a link to this, we can also include that, prefaced with the statement available at, and then afterwards the access date. So the date that we listened to it or perhaps watched it if it's a video. Alright, so we've finished the video and image-based sources. We're now going into the final category, which is just miscellaneous really, other source types. Alright, and we're going to start with reports. In this case, should you come across a report which isn't bundled as part of a web page, perhaps it's a PDF document or something, or even a paper copy report that's been published by an organization perhaps rather than a author or a researcher per se. In this case, it's actually a corporate report, which may be useful to refer to for statistics. So here we've got an example of Marks and Spencer's, and of course we start off by recording the organization name, as you see here, and then we've got the year of publication, as always, and then we've got the title of the report, and make sure you include the full title in italics, of course. And then should it have been published in print copy, include the place of publication and the publisher, or if not, if you've got a link to the PDF, include that as you would have done previously for referring to websites. Should you come across a student's dissertation and find that it contains some information that you want to include or refer to, you can do so by listing the name of the author. As always, we have the author's surname followed by the first name initial, and then the year the dissertation was completed, and then the title in italics. Okay, and then we want to include the level. So you're probably going to find either a master's level dissertation or a PhD level dissertation, unless perhaps you get access to an undergraduate level dissertation. I'd imagine masters and PhD will be more common because these are the ones that are going to be published online more frequently than undergraduate dissertations. Okay, and then after that, just include the name of the university through which the degree was awarded. Okay, and in this case, it's Oxford Brookes University. Next, should you find yourself needing to cite Acts of Parliament, you can do so with this particular format specified here. And you'll notice that we're not starting with an author this time, because that author is going to be the Parliament, in the case of UK anyway. So here we're actually starting with the title of the Act. And you'll see here that it's Food Act. And this is a rare case where you're encouraged to capitalize the keywords, should there be any. And you're also encouraged to include the year and the chapter number. So you've noticed that it says Food Act 1981, and then in brackets, it's got C.5 to refer to chapter 5 of this particular document. Okay, and all this is going to go in italics. And then afterwards, we just simply write the place of publication. In this case, it's the UK Parliament, so it's going to be London, and then the publisher, which is going to be Government Publications. And then, should you find yourself needing to refer to other documents published by the government, you can then be a bit more specific in the formatting of the reference. Here, we can actually refer to a particular government agency, or perhaps even a government department, or if there's an MP or a staff member of Parliament who's written a report, we can refer to that at the start, just like we would usually refer to authors that way. So here, the example, we see UK government, followed by the year of publication, and then the title of the document in italics, as always, and then the city of publication and the publisher, should it have been published in print form, or if it's a digital document, you can refer to the web page that you got it from, and then any particular pages of that report that are relevant. If you're referring to a section of it or a particular page range, you can include that right at the very end. Next, interviews now. So if you're going to be referring to a audio interview, or perhaps a video interview, or even a transcript of either of those two formats, you're going to want to refer to the name of the interviewer. That's going to be the first author. And then you're going to want to refer to the interviewee, if there's one or multiple, as an author as well. Okay, and then it's the year that this interview took place or was recorded, and then finally just the title or a description of the interview. And as it's a title, it's going to go in italics. All right, so it's nice and simple, that one. Next, presentations. Again, a fairly simple format. It's just going to be the author name. So as always, that's their last name, comma, first name initial, Yates, comma, R in this case, and then the year that this presentation took place, or at least the year on the slides of the presentation when it was created, and then finally followed by the name of the presentation or the lecture, which in this case is just Benefits of Herbs, and of course it's a title, so it's going to go in italics. Next, we have music. So should you find yourself needing to reference a piece of music, you can do by referring to the performer, the artist, or if you know the writer of the music, you can also refer to that as well. And in the typical format, of course, with last name and then first name initial, and then the year it was recorded or written, the particular song or piece of music, and then the recording title. So this could be the title of a song, perhaps even the title of an album, perhaps if you're referring to the entire album. And then the medium, which is written in square brackets. So we've got CD recording here, perhaps a little bit dated in this day and age. I'm guessing most of the music we're going to listen to now will be on digital copy or streaming services. So you could find an appropriate classification for that. And then should you know the publisher or the music label, you can also write that at the end too. Should you ever need to reference a dictionary, that actually has its own formatting in the Harvard style, which we start off with the publisher, in this case, which is given the example of Wordy here, and then we have the year this particular dictionary was published. It's quite a recent example here, 2010. Many of them go back a lot longer than that. And then we got the full title of the dictionary, in italics, of course, it's a title, and then the place of publication and the publisher. All right, so as usual there. And then finally, we're going to finish on a medium which is a bit closer to home. Going to finish with software and computer programs. So should you ever need to refer to a name of an app or a piece of software, you would actually start your full reference with that name. And of course, as it's a name, a title of a piece of software, you would italicize that. Here it's just Recipe Gen. And then the year that particular piece of software was published, in brackets as always, and then the place or city where the software was written, if you know that, and the company or the publisher. Or perhaps in this day and age, if it's just an independent developer or just a single person, you can write that there too. All right, so there we go. Hopefully that's comprehensive enough for you. Hopefully that's enough different referencing formats that you're going to need, hopefully more than you'll ever need. But should you come across a particular source that you're not sure what category it fits into, or if you're unsure about anything else to do with referencing, do get in touch with myself and Justin, and we'd be more than happy to help you with that.